but we had to run this program that the company was making us run that didn't work. And so we had the idea, like, what if we kind of did our own thing? What if we found different meal plans? What if we told everybody to put whatever the company gives them in the shredder, to ignore all of it? Let's find different meal plans and let's go above and beyond, and like, let's teach people what this is.
Casey, how did you find carnivore?
I found Carnivore the way a lot of people did. I was listening to a podcast on the Joe Rogan show where he interviewed a doctor named Dr. Sean Baker. And listening to this episode, I'm hearing about a guy in his 50s who's a doctor, an orthopedic surgeon, and he is claiming to be, posting records in rowing and deadlifting, lifting tons of weight, and he's also only eating meat. And it really grabbed my attention, and I listened to this episode right up until the point that he said that as a doctor he didn't really value blood work metrics very much, as much as he valued how he was feeling and how his people were feeling. And at that point I thought, okay, this ridiculous episode just got way too ridiculous even for myself, and I turned it off. And it wasn't until last year that I even went back and finished the entire episode, which was interesting because I had been a personal trainer at that point. Listening to that episode was, I believe it was in 2017. I probably came across it either late in 2017 or 2018, but I had already been a personal trainer for over a decade. I had already been a certified nutrition coach. I'd been working with my clients in that way. And I had been introduced to the idea that fat was actually something that was really good for you and could be incorporated. So part of my training as a personal trainer was I was using what is called a metabolic cart, which hooks up to somebody using a mask and an umbilical cord that collects somebody's respirations, the air that they're breathing in and out. And that gives us a direct kind of, or I guess more indirect, but it gives us a correlation for knowing how many calories somebody is burning. But also because these analyzers would be able to check out the difference between the oxygen and carbon dioxide that your body was exchanging, it would be able to tell you how much fat versus how much carbohydrate you were burning. So that was my whole career with this company, was actually measuring metabolism on people, whether they were resting or whether they were doing exercise, to tell them not only how many calories they were burning by doing particular exercises, but also how much fat versus how much carbohydrate they were burning. And I'd been a competitive cyclist in my life and also a hockey player, so I knew that to be able to compete in cycling at a high level, you needed to eat a very high amount of carbohydrates because that is the fuel that you would burn to perform at your highest level. And the body only stores a very tiny, tiny amount of carbohydrates, and that runs out as you're doing physical activity. It can run out very quickly. And so, as an endurance athlete, you're just taught that you need to, carbo load and load up on pizza and pasta and everything the night before you do an event, and then you take in products while you're doing these long runs and rides, and you're drinking sugary drinks and the products and all this stuff. And I remember learning in 2012 that you could actually manipulate somebody's rate of fat burning by changing their diet and also changing their training program, meaning you could take an endurance athlete, and rather than have them burn through a very high amount of sugar, you could train them to burn a very high amount of fat, which was a total game changer because if you can burn fat, you have access to tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of calories of fat energy that you store for the purpose of being used, rather than burning the carbohydrate that, again, you store just such a tiny amount. And so I had my mind blown again in 2012 when there was a coach that was telling us, like, he had high level endurance athletes doing Ironman at the highest levels, and they were eating cream and bacon and butter, and they were only taking in 50, 60 calories an hour and competing at the highest levels of Ironman. I thought that was absurd. But sure enough, I found out that that could work in people, and worked in my own body, where if I started to eat more fat like avocados and olive oil, my endurance for cycling got a lot better. I could go out on longer rides. I wouldn't run out of energy. I would have a constant flow of energy. I know also that in 2014, I was exposed to the work of Nina Teichel's. I came across an interview that she did. It was kind of a local radio interview here that was available on the internet. And I listened to this woman, a journalist, who was given an assignment back in the early 2000s to cover trans fat. And she found it quite strange that as she was trying to cover this story, people were ignoring her, hanging up the phone on her, and she had a tough time trying to complete this story. So she embarked on a 10-year journey to be able to write the book, The Big Fat Surprise. And I listened to this interview, and she was talking about how all the guidelines were given not based on science, and cholesterol may not have been a big of a problem as we thought, and people were paid, and industry got involved, and all of these things. I thought it was just the strangest story. And I was aware of her work, but I also did not, according to my Facebook, I did not start reading her book until 2 years later, because I think I had a bit of a bit of a resistance to the information, because if she was right, I think everything that I had been taught up to that point was going to be wrong, that people didn't necessarily need grains and vegetables and fruits and all that stuff. So anyway, that was all part of my journey. But when I got certified a little bit later on as a nutrition coach, I got re-indoctrinated into balanced meals, whole grains, vegetables, portion control, eating lots of small meals during the day, planning out snacks, eating the rainbow, eating until you're 80% full. A lot of my nutrition coaching certification was around kind of behavior modification. And so if you came in for a session, which we would be able to easily put you on nutrition coaching sessions pretty much every other week on a continual basis, and you'd come in every 2 weeks, we always had a box of Kleenexes in the nutrition office, because it would inevitably would be very emotional. People have a lot of emotion around food, but they would often fail their goals, and we would sit them down and ask what their goals were, and they would say, oh, I was doing so well on Monday and Tuesday, and then Wednesday I started to get really hungry, and Thursday somebody brought in donuts to the office, and I ate all the donuts and went home and ate a cake, and I decided to start again on Monday, but now I've gained 3 pounds and I don't know what to do. And we could always find something to coach them on. It was so easy to say, like, oh, well, did you eat 7 to 9 different variations of different vegetables? Did you eat until you were 80% full? Did you write in your emotion journal about the food you were eating? There was always something you could find that somebody wasn't doing well enough. And so you could always keep somebody doing that cycle of coaching. And so again, I kind of got redoctrinated into that way of thinking by the time that I heard the Joe Rogan podcast with Dr. Sean Baker. I hear about this carnivore who's only eating ribeyes and is crushing it physically in his 50s. And I thought, this is so ridiculous. I ended up turning it off. And that led to about 2018, when part of the one of the things that we were doing with this company that we were at was we were made to do weight loss contests. This company was making a lot of money when they did 2 month weight loss contests, and they would do them every quarter. So every 3 months, there would be a 2 month weight loss contest. And as personal trainers working for 100% commission for this company, we were required to sign up a certain amount of people that would be considered in our group, and we would take them through and give them meal plans and food lists and lots of workouts and a lot of complicated stuff. The packet of information would be like 125 pages, and the shopping list would be for all of this just really exotic ingredients. I'll never forget the day that somebody called me from the grocery store crying in one of the aisles because she couldn't find arrowroot powder. And I was like, well, I don't even know what arrowroot powder is. I can make an assumption, but I have no idea. I've never shopped for that. Like, it would ask you to buy like rutabagas and just like all these like really weird, obscure kind of ingredients. And it was a shame, because as trainers we had to do this again every 3 months, and we knew the plan wouldn't work. The compliance percentage that I had heard from the company was about 15%, meaning about 15% of people that signed up for this contest and got started, only 15% of them would end up finishing the contest and even stand on the scale at the very end, regardless of whether they succeeded or not. So we knew that the stuff didn't work. We thought everybody sucked at following the advice, yet every 3 months we would have to then go out and sign up more people, another 15 people or whatever. So it's like you have to find new people. You can't find people that have already signed up because they've already failed. They're not going to sign up for this program again. They already have all the information and know it didn't work for them. And it was just like people are buying all of these weird ingredients. They're spending all day on Sunday shopping and then going home and prepping and putting all this food in all these containers for the week, which is great. And you start on Monday and it's fine. And then again, as the week goes on, people are getting less and less motivated. They're getting more and more hungry. The food is literally going bad. And they're also pairing this with exercise, meaning what I was measuring, the whole thing that I was doing with this company, the metabolic rate, the number of calories that somebody is burning naturally, is on a decline. you're teaching yourself as you're doing dieting and exercise, you're teaching yourself to get by on less and less and less calories. Your body uses literally less energy to keep you alive. So it becomes very efficient, which sounds like a good thing. But if you're trying to lose weight and lose fat, being efficient is the last thing you want. You want your body to be burning and using the energy that you've already stored up. You don't want it to be more efficient. And that's what we were finding is people that were following this advice were teaching themselves to burn could be hundreds or in some cases even 1,000 calories less than what their body should have been burning naturally on their own. It was quite astonishing. In fact, one time I even did a measurement on somebody who'd gotten kicked off of the Biggest Loser contest. And after several weeks of doing severe exercise, it was like 6 hours a day, I think she told us, of exercise and eating a very calorie restricted diet, her metabolic rate at a resting state came back 1,000 calories less than what it should have been for somebody her same age, height, weight, and gender. So again, we're doing these stupid contests. We're seeing that they don't work. We're understanding that calorie restricted diets are not good for your metabolism. And it was in 2018, we were doing another one of these stupid contests, and I was assigned a guy who was an employee of the company. And he came to me, and I tried to give him a consultation. He said, I need to lose about 25, 30 pounds. I asked him what he was eating. It was a lot of carbohydrates. He's waking up in the middle of the night to have cereal. I didn't hear him say any fat or protein, which at the very least at that time I knew was of some value. So I said, look, dude, let's just get you eating a little bit more fat and protein. Let's try that. If that can shift you away from eating so much sugar, I think that would be very helpful. And he went away and he came back in a few days and said, hey, I've just lost like 2 or 3 pounds in less than a week. What is this keto stuff? And I said, well, that's pretty cool. That's pretty good weight loss. In fact, any of my personal training certifications say you can't do that. That's losing weight too quick. So I don't know what exactly you lost. You probably lost a bunch of muscle or something. But yeah, I don't really know that much about this keto stuff. And that was pretty much the day that kicked off my obsession of learning about low carbohydrate ketogenic diets. This guy did some research on his own and found out about it. I'm sure I'd heard about it at the time, but maybe just from like magazine covers at the grocery store. But yeah, that was the last time that I listened to music in my car, for example. Like I wanted to know whatever I could about this topic because clearly it was working for this guy. Eventually, he ended up winning the contest, so he lost more weight and more fat than anybody else who did it. For trainers like myself, that was pretty cool because we got recognized. My wife and I, she was working at the same company. We got recognized for giving this guy really good results. So that was really fine. But it was a summer day that my wife and I on a Saturday were sitting at home. We were complaining to each other about how we had another one of these coming up and we didn't know what to do, especially since we had this one guy getting really good results. But we had to run this program that the company was making us run that didn't work. And so we had the idea like, what if we kind of did our own thing? What if we found different meal plans? What if we told everybody to put whatever the company gives them in the shredder to ignore all of it? Let's find different meal plans and let's go above and beyond and like let's teach people what this is. Now that it had been a few months that I'd been learning about it, I kind of had at least somewhat of a grasp of a low carbohydrate diet and how it might work for weight loss for people. And so that's exactly what we did. We went out and got different meal plans. We gave them to our people and told them to ignore all the stuff the company was getting. We would teach different seminars. So in the beginning, we would say, like, look, we're going to teach you about this over time. For now, we just recommend that you start with these meal plans. They were simple meal plans. They were things like taco bowls, lots of vegetables, could be salads, could be, pizza with a meat crust or a low carbohydrate crust or something that the family would like. The meal plans, like I said, were very simple. And, they could be easily adapted to people's families. There were things that kids would like that you could easily add carbohydrates to them if they wanted. Like if people wanted to add rice or potatoes or something, they could, but that was fine. But we just told people, like, find in these meal plans, find meals that look good to you. Make these recipes that are very simple and require very few ingredients. Eat them until you're very, very full. Don't count any calories. Just eat these until you're full. And let's see how this goes. We'll teach you the science over time. But for now, just start with that. Look at these meal plans, start eating these, and get on this path because eventually this will work even though you don't understand it just yet. In the middle part of the 2 month contest, we teach people like, okay, if you're stalling, here's some tips and tricks. Maybe you're eating still too many carbohydrates, too many fruits and vegetables, that kind of thing, maybe too many grains. And in the end, we would, kind of talk to them about, okay, you finished this contest. What is nutrition going to look like for you at the end of this? And we ended up running about 6 cycles of this weight loss contest before the pandemic happened. And we became unemployed. But in the 6 rounds of running this, we achieved tremendous results, and we used a body fat scale in the process. And we measured that of the people who did the contest, the compliance percentage that we had was much higher. It was in about 65% of people would finish the contest who started it. So great improvement over 15%. And of, I think it was 732 total pounds that was lost by these groups, these cohorts, and 720 of those pounds came from body fat. So we were finding that people were losing not only just a lot of weight, but they were losing a lot of fat by eating these low carbohydrate meal plans. And this wasn't a controlled study or anything, but it was, a lot of people, diverse people, men, women, old, young. Some were running, some were lifting weights, some wanted to lose weight, some wanted to gain weight. But everybody was finding that if they stuck pretty much to these meal plans, that they would get tremendous success. And so that was great for us until the pandemic hit of 2020 and we became unemployed from the company. But eventually, in that 2018 kind of time frame, learning about ketogenic diets, I think most of your listeners can relate to. You're learning about keto, you're learning about how this might work, you're learning how meat and vegetables are the best things, and you don't necessarily need a lot of carbohydrates. But somebody will come into the conversation that will say that they're eating only meat and they're not eating any vegetables and they're doing this carnivore diet. And so I started to hear more and more stories like the one of Sean Baker. Dr. Saladino at the time was one who was talking about carnivore diets. He was appearing on other major podcasts, and this is a strange thing to hear about. I think this other doctor on Joe Rogan was talking about it. It's very interesting. And eventually I became convinced that I wanted to try it. And that was April 1st of 2019. I wanted to give it a good 30 days on carnivore to just see how I would feel. I wondered if maybe I would never poop again, or maybe I would die of a heart attack by the end of the 30 days. I wasn't quite sure. But I wanted to try. Enough people had, convinced me that it could be done. Um, and it was great. I loved it. It was a fun experiment. I definitely lost a little bit of fat. Um, the thing that really surprised me, quite unexpected, I would say, is it was about 10 to 12 days into the carnivore diet. I had something very stressful happen to me where somebody wanted to refund a bunch of their personal training sessions. I had worked with this person, I'd already done a free consultation for them. I had scheduled a bunch of these sessions. We make money when we sell training. And like I said, we're on 100% commission. So it's really sink or swim. And this person just wanted a refund out of nowhere. And I remember feeling like that would have upset me for a week before. And I remember just thinking like, okay, yeah, that's fine. Let's get you that refund and make sure you're good. We're always here in the future if you need help. And it was kind of one of those things I didn't almost recognize until afterwards. Like, wow, I really handled that quite well. And I remember moments of like looking out the window and like there were trees and birds and they were just kind of happy. And I was happy, and it was like this baseline of just your normal day to day, like nothing's going on, but you just feel really, really good. And that's when I realized before I tried carnivore, I definitely didn't have any like mental disorders, but I had a lot of anxiety. I would spin around all the time and things that would never going to happen to me, that I would just be worried about all the time. And I found that going carnivore, like my anxiety kind of went away, and I felt again that baseline much better. Problem solving was a lot easier. Stressful moments were just things that you would observe. I've taken up meditation in different parts of my life, and I remember taking it up again during the pandemic, which was quite stressful for us. And I remember that the practice of meditation was much easier on a carnivore diet than it had been. And so, at the end of my 30-day experiment, I decided that that's really what I wanted to do, and I would continue doing it. And then now it's been 5.5 years of being carnivore, and I absolutely love it. So it's been a really fun journey, and again, it's been an obsessive journey. It's something that I think about from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed. I still work with my clients on it. We get people that reach out from all over the world who want to try this, who need some help with coaching, and it's become an absolute obsession and passion of mine. And that's how I found carnivore.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations. And 5.5 years in, um, the thing that strikes me is you've done all this training that says, calorie count calories and whole grains and carbs and all that kind of thing. And you kind of transitioned over to a different way of doing things relatively easily after you saw this is working, keto is working, carnivore works. but I think a lot of people would probably struggle to make that transition.
Yeah, I transitioned rather quickly, but I have a lot of empathy for people who absolutely feel that way because I definitely did. When we were giving out these meal plans and we were eating this way, we did it in a pretty secretive kind of way. Like I didn't want the company to find out. I didn't want other people or other trainers that we were working with to find out what I was doing, and it actually was bothering me in 2018. People knew what I was doing, and it was this weird fad diet called keto. They started calling me Keto Casey. And as a certified personal trainer and nutrition coach, I wanted to work with everybody. If you came to me and said you were plant based, I wanted to be able to help you. Um, and I started to develop this reputation as this guy who's doing this really fringe kind of thing, and I didn't like it. And I had to have a conversation with one of my managers and say like, look, I'm getting this reputation. I don't want to be pigeonholed into this one thing. And he really encouraged me to say like, you know what? If you're doing this thing, like do this thing, like own it, be this guy, and learn a lot about it. And so that's the path that I took. But I totally understand people feeling like they're very isolated or this is very strange or you're doing something that's going to harm people. um to this day I still question a lot of things all the time, and I really want to make sure that I get my information right and I'm explaining things right and that there's not any holes in our arguments. And I see the physical evidence of myself and all the people I work with who try it and all the amazing stories that you and I have both collected over the years, our own personal experience. And you think like you must have gotten something wrong. Like how is this the case that this is right? And it sounds so good to eat lots of meals and to have lots of fruits and vegetables and they're healthy and the whole grain. Like how can that be wrong? How can the US government be wrong? How can a religion have so much influence over nutrition when like they started with this message? The Seventh Day Adventist Church started with a message 160 years ago, yet it's still so influential today. Like, how could that be true? How could like the American Heart Association be wrong and the American Diabetes Association be wrong? Like, it's really wild and it's a crazy story. And so I definitely understand the resistance that people have to this message, and I certainly have had a lot of that, and to this day want to question everything and make sure that we have this right. But again, like when you spend every day so happy and you don't find that you're getting chronologically older, but you don't feel like you're aging very well. Like yesterday on, the hockey game I was playing. There's this kid, this teenager who's trying to take the puck up against me and outskate me. I'm 40 years old, and I see the like surprise that he's like that I'm still like skating with him. I'm just as fast as I was when I was 20, and it's just things like that. Like you just feel so good all the time. And then again, with the people who have questions about this, you start to at least point them in the direction of like eat more meat, eat more fat, go in that direction. And the stories of healing that you hear, it's just astounding and remarkable. And it's just such a yeah, it's such a joy to find it. But yeah, I that's a great question, and I certainly understand people who have trepidation when they find this message for sure.
Yeah. You just made me think there as well when you're talking about, going back to the Seventh-day Adventist Church and how they have so much influence and stuff. When you actually start to look into this and realize how everything started and it's got to this point, it's almost like reading a book like the Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown or something. It's like you're going back through history and there's a key that unlocks this and that opens the door and you find out that this was the reason that cornflakes came to be and all this kind of thing. It's like this thriller novel. It's really crazy.
That's a great way to say it. And that's, I believe, the way The Economist described Nina Teichel's book, The Big Fat Surprise, is like a nutritional thriller. And you wouldn't think that nutrition would be all that thrilling. You know what I mean? But you're right. It is like a murder mystery or something where you're learning about all these stories. And yeah, again, a tiny religion, having this diet that they recommend. How does that have any influence on what we do today? But they were the ones that started all the dietitian schools in the 1910s, and they were the ones who, got into the guidelines, and you follow that story all the way through and realize how much influence they have today. And I'll give you another example that I've been just kind of mulling over recently. I'm part of Dr. Chafee's book club that he does, and so people around the world sign up for this book club, and we have a book every month that we read, and we discuss it as a group, and that's been really fun the weeks that I can make it. And this week, or this month, we're reading a book called The Stone Age Diet. Very obscure book. It's free online. You can find it. I had never heard of it before. It was written in the 1970s by a doctor, and it's a quite interesting book where he makes a very, very, very strong case. Even then, that we are carnivores, we developed as carnivores. He talks a lot about digestive systems and compares our digestive system with that of like a sheep or other herbivores. He talks about our history and all this stuff. And one of the chapters is all about the history of how we discovered vitamins. We discovered deficiency. I want to say it was thiamine was the first vitamin that we discovered. And we discovered it because people who were eating a certain kind of a washed rice were getting a deficiency in vitamins called beriberi. And they discovered, okay, it's a deficiency because we're treating this rice a little bit differently. And we started to go down this path of vitamins, vitamins, vitamins. We need vitamins. And, in the 1920s, the message got out that vitamins were very, very important. And so, again, this book tells a story. I don't know if this is literally how this went down or if this is just kind of a way to think about it. But I thought it was interesting. And again, just talking about our history, he describes a woman walking into a grocery store, maybe in New York City in February. And she walks in and looks around and sees that there are maybe like a few apples that are, kind of bruised, and maybe a potato that is there, but it's already like growing roots and everything else is canned or in boxes. And she asked the store manager, like, I need tomatoes. Do you have any fresh tomatoes? And the store manager is like, it's February and we're in New York City. Like, I don't have tomatoes. There's canned tomatoes. We don't have fresh tomatoes. And she's like, I need fresh tomatoes because I just learned from this magazine that tomatoes are high in vitamin C. And now I'm going to give my kid a vitamin deficiency. I need fresh tomatoes. And again, in this story, he describes maybe a distributor who distributes groceries is maybe in the store as well. And as he's driving and making his deliveries, he might have found himself down in the southern part of the United States where maybe they had so many tomatoes at the time that they were trying to get rid of them. And he might have thought to himself, like, they're selling a truckload of tomatoes for $20. In New York, they're willing to buy tomatoes at $1 a pound. I wonder if there's a way that I can get these tomatoes from here to there. And you think at the time in the 1920s, it's not like they had industrial shipping trucks. It's not like roads were great. But he describes, like, if I can make this much money, maybe I can study like the route and see how I can get from point to point to point. And he goes up and finds a market in New York City for tomatoes where he can buy tomatoes in the southern United States for $20 and sell the lot for $2,000. And that could have been the birth of an entire industry and how we could have gotten fresh fruits and vegetables from some parts of the world to other parts of the world, and maybe Chicago, further up into Toronto, all these major cities. And it's like, it's interesting to contemplate. And again, I'm not familiar with that as like the literal history, but it's interesting to contemplate that that could have been the way that it gone down, and that's how these things come to be. Because now we go into a store today and none of us thinks twice about the fact that we see tomatoes all the time. I can go to Japan. We can both go to Toronto. We could travel down to South Africa. It doesn't matter. We can buy mangoes 365 days out of the year. We can buy tomatoes. They taste terrible, by the way. I wouldn't recommend that you buy tomatoes at the store because they're gross. And that's how these things start, is like you walk into these stores and you don't realize that that was not a normal thing, and we had to have refrigeration and transportation to have fresh produce. For example, like most apples that you find at the store have already been picked over a year ago. In the industry, they call them birthday apples because they're on average about 14 months old, according to the information that I've seen. And it's the same reason why you can buy that same apple and keep it on your countertop and it stays good for a really long time. Like, that's not normal. A natural apple would not do that. And again, we're just talking about things like fruits and vegetables. We're not talking anything about the processed crap, the refinement of sugar, the refinement of grains, seed oils, all of these new things in our diets that we're eating at such high quantities. that is doing probably far worse than even things like fruits and vegetables. So it is like a murder mystery, I would say, like a thriller. It's very interesting to kind of get into these things and find out where the origins of all these things came from.
Mm, yeah, definitely. So when you're working with your coaching clients now, do you find it hard to convince some people that, turning the food pyramid upside down is the way they should go?
That's a great question. In 2020, when the pandemic hit, my wife and I were placed on unemployment. It was a very uncomfortable time in our lives, really, really tough time. I actually have no memory of the first 2 weeks of the pandemic. For whatever reason, I've blocked it out. It's completely black to me. I don't know what I did for the first 2 weeks. The first productive thing I did after the 2 weeks is I got certified through, at the time it was called Meet RX, so it was Sean Baker's company, to be able to coach people, and I got that certification. They no longer offer it anymore, but I was listed on their website as a coach that people from around the world could hire. And through that experience, I learned what it was like to work with people who are seeking out the carnivore diet versus me talking to people who had no interest in the carnivore diet. And so that was a cool perspective to say, like, if somebody wants this information, they're eager for this information. For them, no, it's not that challenging to give them the information because they're looking for it. They've either found me on, that kind of coaching platform, or through our podcast, or on our website, or whatever, and they're interested in it. I've also learned, I know you talk about this a lot, this sucks. I've also learned that for as much as we want to share this information, we want to tell the world, the number of times, man, it's stupid. I know, Dave, it's so dumb, but I will stop at the Costco where somebody is checking my receipt, and they'll see this entire cart filled with meat and fat, and I'll say something like, "Look at this! No plants were harmed in the filling of this shopping cart." They don't care. Like, they don't care. They don't want to hear that information. And so definitely we get questioned by our family, and some friends, and I have friends on Facebook who will just send me messages like that I'm stupid, or this is dumb, and I'm going to die without vegetables, or I'm going to have a heart attack. And so, yeah, like, for them it's a lot harder, and I don't try. Like, I'll tell people, like, I'm like the car salesman that works at the Chevrolet dealership. I work at the Chevrolet dealership because I've driven a Chevrolet and I really like it. I'm not telling you that Fords are the worst cars ever. I'm not telling you that Oldsmobiles are stupid. I just work at the Chevy dealership, and if you want to buy a Chevy, you should talk to me. If you want to buy a Ford, like, go talk to the Ford people. They can maybe sort you out. I found that the more I tried to work with plant-based people, I could not figure out how to get it to work for them. Maybe it is the very best diet, and it would make people a lot healthier if they did it, but frankly, like, it wasn't practically good. It was like that compliance percentage in our weight loss contest, where people couldn't buy that many vegetables and make that much food, and nobody could practically do it. So it didn't matter how good the diet was or wasn't. Um, and also, I'll say, for anybody trying to improve their health, our biggest message, like getting started, is just focus on the fats and proteins. Try to get more animal products in your diet. At least start with that. Um, and I think most people find that they get a lot more full and satiated on that. And then, if they like, and if they're seeing good results, they can take further steps to continue to eliminate certain plant foods, to eat more meat. Hopefully, they make it to a fully carnivorous diet, and enjoy those benefits, because I think that one step is such an amazing step for health. Something that you told me in our conversation that we had, really stuck out with me, and I emphasized it in the show, and I want to emphasize it again now. You are already eating a very ketogenic diet, and if I heard, again, I've been carnivore 5.5 years. I coach people on this all the time. I'm still surprised by this, that you told me you were eating 8 eggs with bacon. I think you said you were eating with cheese, which already I'm like, that's a huge win. That's great. And you were including peppers with that, some yellow peppers and red peppers, I believe. And you were having severe gastric distress. And again, to this day, if somebody told me they were eating that way, I would probably be more likely to throw them a parade and say, like, you're doing awesome. This is great. Don't change anything. Just a few peppers, like, you'll be fine. It is that last little step. If you can take that last little step, that, like, wow, now I never get a sunburn, or my athlete's foot is gone. I've always had athlete's foot. And it was like once or twice a year I would injure my shoulder. Nothing terrible, but like my shoulder would ache for a week. That doesn't happen anymore. And all these like wonderful magical things happen when you take that last step to try an actual carnivore diet where you're fully eliminating all the plant foods. So again, it really depends on where somebody is. We don't ever try to tell somebody they have to do something. We just try to provide advice for a direction that somebody can take, and at the end of the day, it's up to them to be able to do it. So I'm very fortunate in the way that most people that I work with know what we do, know what we're going to suggest, and are kind of expecting that. And so already that helps select out people that would be very, very resistant to it. And another example I'll just give quickly is like I've got a client who I've been personal training now for 2 years. And in the very beginning, I explained to him, not only do I do training, I do nutrition coaching. This is the philosophy that I do. And he came out and just said, like, hey, I eat a vegetarian diet. So agree to disagree. I don't need any nutrition advice. And I said, fine. And it's been 2 years, and I've been able to build rapport with him and not lose him as a client for personal training. And who knows? Maybe one day in his 30s, he's in his 30s, he's already on a statin and a blood pressure medication. Maybe one day we will have built up enough rapport that he'll be open to talking about those things or notice the downsides. And at the very least, I feel like, okay, I've continued to work with him. I didn't shut him down and say, okay, I don't want to work with you. So hopefully one day that comes around.
So, for you personally, how are you eating day to day, and how many times? And like, what percentage of your time in a week is actually you training in the gym?
Well, the last question, like me doing my own training, like lifting weights, minutes. If it's 30 minutes, I would be stunned. Total, yeah. In an entire week, yeah, I've learned different ways of working with people in my own personal training that like I where I was doing 45 minutes to an hour 5 6 days a week. I will do 15 20 minutes in a week. It's very you know kind of spotty when I do it. It might be if I arrive at a facility 5 minutes before somebody arrives, I might go do one or two sets of certain exercises and do them. It's really hard. It's very very challenging. But yeah, I spend very little time in the gym, and we can get into that if you like. But my current day of eating, and this is like most people, it definitely evolves over time. I have to say I'm kind of indifferent on coffee. I usually have coffee. If I decide want to skip coffee, I really frankly don't notice that big of a difference. I'm fortunate in that way. I know recently you've cut out coffee and know how challenging that can be in the beginning. I've done experiments when I cut it out, and I don't notice a huge difference. In my coffee, I do salt, I do MCT oil, and I do butter. And I really wonder if me drinking the coffee is for the fat and the salt that I really, really crave. And I work really early days, like by 6 a.m. I'm already starting with my clients. So it's not like a job where at 8 or 9 a.m. you can kind of like slouch your way to the office and get through a few meetings and kind of build up to your day. I've got to be on and performing at 6 a.m. And I noticed that when I consume the fat, especially like the MCT oil, my brain feels really good and I feel really energetic and I'm just more ready to go. So I still do coffee in the morning. I will typically have anywhere from about 10, I'd say 8 to 12 eggs kind of ready to go that are hard boiled at any given time. And I will, in my head, be thinking, like, okay, this is going to be my first meal, which will sometimes fall between maybe noon and 2 or 3 p.m. I do tend to get kind of hungry around that time. My hunger is just an emptiness in my stomach. There's no drop in energy. I don't feel any different. There's no hanger. I'll plan that in my head, but some days, a lot of days, I just get busy. I've got things going on, things I'm planning. Maybe I'm not super hungry, or again, just I'm really busy. So I will sometimes miss that meal and only eat later on. It just kind of depends. I don't notice a huge difference whether it's in or out. I did do OMAD for a significant amount of time in my carnivore journey, and I also at a point, this is years, it was probably maybe year and a half, 2 years of doing OMAD, I did start to notice the signs and symptoms that I was very aware of and recognizing when somebody had a low metabolic rate. They always had these symptoms where they would feel low energy, they'd be gaining fat more than they liked, and they'd be feeling especially like cold hands and feet. Just a classic sign that your metabolic rate is slow. And so I did OMAD for a long time, 1 meal a day, and I started to notice I was gaining weight around my midsection. I was feeling pretty like internally cold in my hands and feet. So I introduced that second meal. I don't always get it, like I said. And then um, if Sean Baker is somebody that you or your listeners follow, if you follow him on social media, he makes these videos where he'll either pull up something funny that a vegan said, like the fart walks that people who eat a lot of fiber do or something, or he'll show like carnivores doing awesome things. But when he's doing it, he's making this steak. He eats a huge amount of meat, but he makes this steak that looks perfect every time. He has this giant, like Viking looking knife in his hand that makes it look so cool. And I was just wondering to myself one day, like, how does he make this steak? It looks so good. And he put out a video. It's about 7, 8 minutes long, where he shows what he does to make this steak. And so he uses what's called a sous vide, which is a kind of cylinder thing that you put into a container of water that circulates temperature, water at a certain temperature. So he would take whatever steak he wanted, he would vacuum seal it, he would drop it into the sous vide, cook it for 2 hours at 120 degrees, and then he would take the steak and put it into this grill that is, it's a kind of box size. It was outside with propane, and the top facing down would heat up really really hot, like 1500 degrees, and you could take a shelf and put your steak on the shelf and then raise the shelf up, and this would give your steak this like perfect sear, and it looked amazing. But these grills were like starting price for like $1,000. Some of them were like $2,000, and that was kind of steep for what I wanted to, for something just to try to see if it was even any good. But I found one that was on Amazon, and it was only like $150. So I decided to try it. I've used that for almost a year now. And the combination of cooking your steak in a sous vide means it's perfectly cooked to 120 degrees. That's the perfect temperature that I like. It's just kind of mostly kind of medium rare, more on the rare side. And then taking that, opening up, drying it off, putting some salt on your steak, and then taking it on this grill, heating it up 60 seconds, 90 seconds on each side. You pull the tray out, set your steak on, put it in, flame shoot out. So don't get too close to it. You might singe your eyebrows. Pull it out, flip it, put it back in. And in, again, 60 seconds, you have perfect steak every single day. Perfect, perfect, perfect steak. And so what I'll do is I will cook up in a batch in the sous vide, maybe 6, 7, 8 different steaks at a time. I usually try to do a 50-50 split between New York and ribeye. And in the afternoon, when I'm starting to get hungry, I will just pull those out. I'll get them ready, and I will, warm them back up and then put them on the grill and cook them. And I typically can eat about a pound and a half. It's very consistent for me. I know about a pound and a half is about right. And I am just so happy eating the same food every single day. Some days I want the ribeye. I feel like a little bit more fat sounds really good. And other days I want a little bit more protein, and the New York sounds really good. And so that's pretty much what I do every single day. I have not gotten sick of it. I will add some things in here and there. So, once a week, maybe some ground beef, once a week, maybe some, very little, a little bit more in the summertime, but maybe some chicken or some seafood. But for the most part, if my staple isn't, eggs and steak in particular, I don't feel as good. I don't have as much energy. So that's a pretty typical day for me. And boy, it's really quite delicious. I have no complaints.
Sounds awesome. You make it's quite late at night here, and you're still making me hungry. Um, so one thing that you said there that I just want to kind of highlight is you talked about you might miss that first meal because you get busy, and you'll have an empty feeling in your stomach, but you're not hangry, or you're not irritated, or you're not feeling like I need to eat, I need to eat, I need to eat. How good is it to be eating in a way where you can be like that? You can just power through. I couldn't power through 2 hours before.
No, no, it can't be overstated how amazing that is. And like you said, you couldn't go 2 hours before. Same. I mean, as trainers, we've got clients all day. We're very busy. Um, we don't really have a lot of time between going from one appointment to the next to the next. If we have a good business and people want to train with us, you fill up. You're busy, and so to take time out of your day to go consume the yogurt snacks or the granola bars or whatever was the latest and greatest homemade protein hemp bar, whatever you could come up with between clients. You had to do something. You were always hungry, and it was every 2 hours. Or man, like since going carnivore, I have not taken a nap. Like literally, I have not taken a single nap. I needed a nap every single day. I would come home after a full day of work, and I'd have to sleep for an hour and a half before I could carry on with my day. I have not taken a nap. This is I told somebody that, and they were like, they have kids and so they're very busy. They're like, "Oh my goodness, don't tell me you're not taking you should be taking naps for the rest of us who can't take naps." I'm like, that's really fun, but I like to be productive and get along with my day. And yeah, it's I think that is one thing that really can't be overstated is how easy it is to go about your day. Yes, you might feel hungry, but the hunger is just gentle. Um, we after being unemployed, we started our business and we started a podcast soon after that. In October 2020 is when we started our podcast, Balanced Body Radio. And I had a guest on from England, who I love this story, and it's something I always tell my clients and compare this to. He describes his hunger before he found low carb diets as a bully. So whatever he was doing in his day, whether he was with his family or at work, busy in a meeting, on vacation, this bully would come in, shove him down, try to take his milk money, tell him that he needed to deal with the bully. You didn't have a choice. Whatever you were doing, you had to eat, and that's what his hunger was like. And he described finding this way of eating, and describes his hunger now as just a really good friend. And this good friend, around lunchtime might tap him on the shoulder and say, "Hey, how's it going? It's normally our lunchtime. Do you think you want to eat now? If not, I can come back. I'll just come back later. Like, it'll say you're busy, whatever. I'll just come back." And that's what he describes as hunger like. And I thought that was such a good analogy that a lot of people can relate to. Is just like, do you want the kind of hunger that grabs your attention and forces you to eat right now, or do you want the kind of hunger that's kind to you? And like the days that you are hungry and you want to eat, you can eat, and that's totally fine. But also, you might be busy, or you might want to do other things. You might be on vacation sightseeing. Like there may be other things you want to do. And if your hunger feels like this little wave that crests and then falls and goes back to baseline, and it's just this little grumble in your tummy, and you're not awful to people and not moody and grumpy, like it's amazing. I love the food freedom that you have on carnivore.
Yeah, your descriptions are so good. I like the way you describe the carnivore hunger is very nice. It's like a gentle hunger. It's just like, "Hey, I'm a little bit hungry now, maybe we should eat something soon."
Yep.
Whereas, the before times, it's like, yeah, the bully that throws you up against the wall and gives you a wedgie or something, It's
Exactly. Not very pleasant.
yeah.
uh,
Um, so, when you're talking to someone who is seriously considering getting started with carnivore, how do you advise them to move into it? Is it a
Great question.
gradual transition?
That's a great question. I will tell people that transitioning over to carnivore is very much like getting into a pool that is kind of a cool temperature. And on the one end, there's a gradual end where the kids play, and it starts out pretty gradual, and you can work your way in. There's also this other side that has the diving boards, and you can jump in head first. And carnivore to me is very, very safe, with a few caveats. I think it's something you need to be very careful with if you're transitioning from a vegan diet or a diet that was very, very heavy in oxalates in particular. You need to be very careful on how you step into a carnivore diet that way, because you can have a very severe reaction with oxalate dumping. I've seen it myself, and it's not pretty. That said, even people that are doing like a standard American diet, I think they can transition. I think there's things they need to be aware of in the beginning to make that transition easier on themselves. But I think it's perfectly safe for anybody to transition onto, with that caveat. And I'll just tell people, like, your own personality, how you are with other things. You can, if you like, get into this pool on the more gradual end. It's going to take longer, but you're going to get used to the temperature over time. And if, for that person, the story, the coaching is around, okay, just focus the foods you're eating around the animal products and focus on salty, fatty, red meat in particular. Salty, fatty, red meat. Focus on that. Don't worry about how much it is. Don't worry about the quality, quote unquote quality. Most quality, again, quote unquote quality in the Western world is very high and very, very good, regardless of whether you're getting organic, grass fed, grass finished, whatever. Cows are extremely efficient in converting grass, regardless, into high quality proteins and fats. But just focus on that and let the other things just not be the main focus. Let the animal fats and proteins be the main focus. And again, that would be like a more gradual transition for somebody who wanted to jump in. I would definitely recommend that they can be able to do that. In the beginning, for somebody like that, I would want them to do something close to what has been described as priming, where somebody is continuing to eat several meals of animal based foods every single day. So I'd want somebody to eat 3 meals a day. I want each one of the meals to be very satiating. I've had it argued to me to coach people to, like, they can include coffee in the diet, but don't start with coffee as the very first meal of the day, because it's a kind of a suppressant, an appetite suppressant. And so if you're trying to prime somebody, then you don't want to suppress their appetite in the very beginning. I want them to eat 3 meals a day. And what inevitably happens is somebody eating carnivore 3 times a day, it's like wonderful for your first few days until you realize, like, this is way too much. People get quite miserable eating that many days, or that many times in a day. And then to transition maybe to two times a day and 1 time a day. And they can transition and get on the stricter version of the diet more quickly and easily. I definitely noticed that there is a wide variance in tolerance for certain things. I think some people can have a certain amount of plant foods and not be 100% strict all the time. Um, I know for me personally, I do need to be a little bit more on the strict side, but if I have some avocado every now and again, it doesn't really bother me. Coffee doesn't really bother me. Um, I've noticed for me personally that I am probably further along the line of being a sugar addict, and I have problems with even things like fruit. I won't tell somebody that fruit is necessarily unhealthy. I just know that if I personally have it, I will be extremely hungry in a very short period of time. And my next hunger is that bully hunger that we were talking about. And now I don't want more fruit. I want candy bars and a pie and crappy food. And so for me, if it's something that I don't need, I don't crave it anymore, I can just be more on the strict side and say, I'm an abstainer. I don't eat fruit. I don't want it. I don't need it. I don't want to be hungry. I don't want to deal with the return anxiety that I get. Um, so as we're working with somebody and getting started, we'll approach it differently depending on what their personality is and what they want to do, and coach them differently based on those things. But again, I think either way is totally safe. And yeah, somebody who thinks they can do it more gradually, that's fine as well. I wish more people would try it. I wish more people would try a stricter version, at least temporarily, to see what can still clear up. As you found, quite surprisingly, even a small amount of peppers was affecting you quite a lot. So yeah, I do wish more people would try a stricter version and try to maybe rip the band-aid off if that works with their personality.
Yeah, I mean, I found even with dairy, like just cutting out the dairy and like instant results because you're just carrying water and there's a bit of inflammation there, you know?
Yep.
Um,
Dairy is definitely one that in the beginning I will say, like, go ahead and have whatever dairy, but it's also one on a very short list of, like, if you're trying a carnivore diet with dairy and you're continuing to experience results that you don't like, that's probably one that has to go.
so Casey, if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way of getting in contact?
Yeah, the best way of getting in contact is our website, which is myboundlessbody.com. That's the name of the company my wife and I started during the pandemic when we were unemployed. Um, the very first thing that people will see on the website is a book now button where people can click and schedule a session with us that syncs up with our schedule. And you can book a time to chat with us. We tell people all the time in this consultation, we can talk about your nutrition. We can talk about your plan for health. We can talk about, what kind of lifting weights you want to do to only be in a gym 15 or 20 minutes a week if you want to really minimize your time and get the maximum amount of results. I also tell people on my podcast all the time, like, if you want to book a time just to say hello and chat about your journey, I just love to meet you. I love what you're doing in your work, where you're finding people all over the world and sharing their stories, and people feel really validated, and they just, the comments I see on your channel are just absolutely amazing. So I love what you're doing that way. And if people want to reach out and do that, they can. On the website, they can also find our podcast called Boundless Body Radio. We've been doing releases 3 days a week since October of 2020. And so we just passed 500,000 downloads worldwide, and I just edited our 700th episode. So that's been really fun. Most of the episodes have something to do with carnivore diets, although we explore lots of different topics as well. And then also on the website, this summer, I decided to do a seminar series in my neighborhood where I'm just teaching a class for free. I'm sharing the meal plans that I mentioned earlier that got such good results before. And then every week there's a different curriculum with a different lesson and different things that people can get for resources. We do book giveaways and all that stuff. All of that is for free. We record all the classes that I teach. Those are all available on YouTube, and you can find that on the website as well. That's all free and available there. But yeah, the best place to go is website, which is myboundlessbody.com.
Awesome. I'll link to that below in the show notes. Casey, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experience. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so very much. I really, really love your work, and it was a true honor to be on your show.